The Duke rejected his twins for their crippled legs. But the maid's secret care changed everything. I was there the night they were born. The Duchess's cries echoed through the manor, a sound of agony and hope intertwined. Hours passed in torment, until at last the cries of newborns filled the chamber, two tiny voices piercing the silence of death. For while the twins breathed, their mother did not. She gave her last breath to bring them into this world, and from that moment, sorrow became the foundation of their lives. The Duke stood like a statue when the midwife placed the children in his arms. Two beautiful infants, a boy and a girl, their eyes closed, their tiny fists clenched. Yet instead of wonder, I saw his face harden. He looked at them not as blessings but as burdens, for their little legs lay limp and unmoving. "Crippled," the physician whispered, not unkindly. But to the Duke, the word was a sentence. From that day, he never called them his. He buried himself in duty, in council chambers, in letters sealed with wax. When nobles asked after the heirs, he offered curt replies, changing the subject. To the world, he presented himself as a man broken by the death of his wife, but I saw deeper. He was not only broken, he was ashamed. Ashamed that his children bore a flaw no sword, no wealth, no title could erase. And so the twins grew under my care alone. I had served the Duchess faithfully, and in her dying moments she clutched my hand, whispering, "Promise me, protect them." I swore it with tears burning my eyes, and I have never broken that vow. The twins were lovely children, bright and curious. Their minds raced ahead of their years. They memorized stories, asked questions that would have challenged scholars. But when they tried to stand, their legs betrayed them. They fell, again and again, their little faces breaking with frustration. Still, I never let them give up. I massaged their legs each night, pressing gently, praying silently that life might return to them. The Duke never joined us. He passed the nursery door without slowing, his cloak brushing the stone as though he could not bear to step inside. The children noticed. Oh, how they noticed. "Why doesn't Papa love us?" the boy asked me once, his green eyes wet with confusion. "Does he hate us because we can't walk?" his sister whispered, clutching her doll tightly. I lied, because what else could I do? "He is busy. He is grieving. One day, he will see you for who you are." But each time I spoke those words, bitterness lodged deeper in my chest. Worse still were the whispers from the servants. Cursed children, born broken, just like their mother's death. They thought themselves clever, safe behind closed doors, but words are smoke. They travel, they cling. The twins heard them, and each cruel phrase carved another wound. I wanted to shield them from it all, but I could not shield them from their father's absence. And absence, I learned, is the cruelest form of rejection. Yet I refused to surrender to despair. Every night, after tucking them into bed, I would kneel by the fire, warming oil in my hands. I would massage their legs, pressing and rubbing, coaxing life where there seemed to be none. Some nights I felt foolish, a maid chasing miracles. But I could not stop. Love makes fools of us all, and mine for those children was fiercer than any reason. "Will we ever walk?" the girl asked me once, her eyes searching mine. "Yes," I said without hesitation, though I had no proof. "One day you will stand. One day you will run. And when that day comes, the world will know you were never cursed. You were chosen." They smiled then, fragile but real, and clung to each other as they drifted to sleep. I prayed silently, not for myself, not even for the Duke, but for them. That one day their laughter would drown out the whispers. That one day their father would see them not as broken, but as whole. And that perhaps, in some corner of heaven, their mother would know her children had not been abandoned. The years that followed were heavy with contradictions. The twins grew in brilliance, their minds sharper than blades, their laughter like sunlight when they forgot the weight of their legs. Yet in the eyes of their father, they remained invisible. When they were 3, the Duke hosted a gathering of neighboring lords. The manor glittered with chandeliers, the tables heavy with feasts. I dressed the twins in their finest, silk trimmed with lace, their little shoes polished though they would never wear them thin. They begged me to bring them near the great hall, just for a glimpse of their father among the nobles. I hesitated, but their eyes shone with hope, and I could not deny them. We entered quietly, slipping to a corner where shadows might hide us. The twins clutched each other's hands, their faces bright as they saw him standing tall before the assembly. But then, a noblewoman noticed them. Her fan snapped open, and her words, though whispered, carried. The heirs? Poor things, broken from birth. How pitiful. The room stirred. More whispers followed, cruel smiles hidden behind jeweled hands. Cursed children. No wonder he keeps them away. The Duke's gaze flicked toward the corner. His eyes met theirs, his son's eager smile, his daughter's trembling hand. And then he turned away. He did not speak, did not claim them, did not silence the venom of the nobles. He let the whispers stand. The boy's small voice broke beside me. He doesn't want us. The girl buried her face in my dress, her shoulders shaking. My fury burned hot, but I held them close, swallowing the tears I could not shed before the court. That night, as the manor emptied and silence returned, I carried them to bed. They did not speak, but their questions weighed on me all the same. How could I explain a father's cruelty to children who had done nothing but live? From that day, their hope dimmed. They no longer waited by the doors of his study, no longer asked if he might come to the nursery. They learned to expect nothing, and it broke my heart to watch them grow so young and yet so old in their disappointment. Still, I kept my promise. Each evening, I warmed oil by the fire and massaged their legs, pressing, coaxing, whispering prayers I no longer dared speak aloud. Some nights they cried, frustrated that nothing changed. Other nights they whispered dreams. If I could walk, the boy said, I'd race Papa in the courtyard. His sister added, if I could walk, I'd dance like Mama did. Their words sliced through me like knives, but I never let them see my despair. One day, I told them, my voice steady though my hands trembled. One day, you will do all those things. The Duke avoided them still, though I caught glimpses of something beneath his mask. Once, passing the nursery door, he paused. His hand lingered on the frame, his eyes softening as he heard their laughter. But then, as always, he moved on, as though the weight of his shame chained him to his grief. Among the servants, cruelty spread unchecked. They'll never walk. Better if they had not lived. I silenced who I could, but whispers multiply faster than truth. And though I tried to shield the twins, they understood. Their bright minds could not ignore what their ears caught. It was then that I began to see my place differently. I was not simply their caretaker, not merely a servant bound by duty. I was their only shield. And shields must sometimes defy the hand that wields them. For if the Duke would not protect his children, then I would, even if it meant risking everything. And so, one evening, after carrying them to bed, I resolved to speak, to stand before the Duke as I had once stood before his Duchess, to look him in the eye and tell him what he had refused to hear. The children deserved more than silence. They deserved a father. I had rehearsed the words 100 times in my mind, yet when I finally stood outside the Duke's study, they scattered like frightened birds. My heart thundered, my hands damp with sweat. I was a maid, after all. What right had I to confront the master of the house? and yet I carried a promise stronger than fear. The Duchess's last breath had bound me to her children, and I would not betray her. The door loomed before me, heavy oak carved with the crest of his house. Behind it I heard the scratch of quill on parchment, the shuffle of papers, the low murmur of a man who buried himself in duty. I knocked. "Enter," came his voice, cold and distracted. I stepped inside. He did not look up at first, his eyes fixed on a letter, his hand poised with ink. "What is it?" he asked, clipped, impatient. I drew a breath. "It is about the twins, my lord." That made him pause. Slowly he raised his gaze, and the weight of it pinned me where I stood. Gray eyes, sharp and unyielding, studied me as though I were a trespasser in sacred ground. "What about them?" he asked, his tone heavy with warning. I swallowed hard, my courage faltering. But then I thought of their little voices whispering in the dark, asking why their father did not love them, asking if they should not have been born, and my fear turned to fire. "They need you," I said, my voice steady now. "They need more than bread and clothes and lessons. They need their father. And every day you refuse them. Every day you turn away. You wound them deeper than their legs ever could." His jaw tightened. "You forget your place," he said, each word like a lash. "No, my lord," I answered, daring to meet his eyes. "I remember it too well. I am only a maid. But because of that, I hear what others say when they think no one listens. I hear the servants call them cursed. I hear the nobles pity them as broken. And worse, I hear the children whisper at night that perhaps they are to blame, that perhaps you hate them for what they are." His face hardened, but his eyes flickered, pain buried deep. Still, he clung to his armor. "They were born imperfect," he said finally, the words dragging like chains. "Their birth cost me the only woman I ever loved. Tell me, how am I to look upon them without remembering what was taken?" The rawness of his voice startled me. It was not cruelty alone. It was grief sharpened into a weapon, turned not on the world, but on his own blood. I stepped closer, my voice low but fierce. "Then you dishonor her. The Duchess gave her life so they could live. And you, by rejecting them, you make her sacrifice in vain. They are not her curse, my lord. They are her gift." Silence fell, heavy and suffocating. He stared at me, his chest rising and falling, his hands clenched on the desk as though to anchor himself. For a long moment, I feared I had gone too far, that he would dismiss me, cast me from the house for my insolence. But instead he spoke in a voice I had never heard from him before, raw, unguarded. "Do they believe it? That I hate them?" The question broke something inside me. I wanted to shield him from the truth, but lies had already done too much harm. "Yes," I whispered. "They believe it more each day, and your silence tells them it is true." He closed his eyes, his face contorted as though struck. For once, the Duke, proud, unshakable, unyielding, looked like a man drowning. I left him there, in that silence, unsure if my words had pierced his armor or only wounded him further. But the next morning, when the twins waited in their chairs by the nursery window, something changed. The Duke entered, his steps halting. He did not speak, but he stopped. His eyes lingered on them, longer than ever before. And when the boy timidly lifted a wooden block toward him, as if offering a piece of himself, the Duke's hand hesitated, then took it. The children's faces lit with a joy I had not seen in years. To them, it was a miracle. To me, it was the first crack in a wall I prayed would one day crumble. Change does not arrive in grand declarations. It creeps in quietly, like dawn seeping into a darkened room. After, After the night I confronted the Duke, something shifted in him. The silence did not vanish, but it cracked, and through that crack, a sliver of light began to show. The morning after, the children found him in the corridor outside the nursery. Usually, he would stride past, his cloak swirling, his eyes averted. But this time, he paused. He stood awkwardly, his hands behind his back, as though uncertain what to do. The boy clutched a wooden block in his hand, and trembling, held it out. To my astonishment, the Duke took it. His large fingers closed around the small toy, and for a heartbeat, he studied it. Then, wordlessly, he placed it back in the boy's palm and nodded. It was nothing, a gesture so small it might have gone unnoticed. Yet to the children, it was everything. Their faces lit with wonder, as if he had handed them a crown. That night, they whispered to each other in bed, voices breathless with hope. "He saw us," the girl said. "He touched my toy," the boy added. And their laughter was softer, brighter. But hope is fragile, and the Duke was still a man bound by chains of grief and shame. His visits were rare, his words hesitant. Sometimes he lingered in the doorway of the nursery, watching as they colored pictures or stacked blocks. His lips pressed tightly, his shoulders tense, but his eyes softened. The children noticed. They dared to wave. Sometimes he even managed the smallest of nods in return. Still, he kept his distance. He could not yet bring himself to sit on the floor with them, to share their games. His silence was less cruel now, but it remained a barrier. And so, my work continued in secret. Each evening, after I tucked them into bed, I warmed the oil by the fire and massaged their legs. My hands moved carefully, pressing, coaxing life into muscles that refused to respond. At first, they winced at the discomfort, but soon they grew used to the rhythm, their breathing slowing as I worked. "Will this make us walk, Nanny?" the girl asked one night, her wide eyes hopeful. "Yes," I told her firmly. "Each night we grow closer. Each night your legs remember what they were meant to do." The boy frowned thoughtfully. "Then one day we'll race Papa in the garden." My chest tightened, but I smiled. "Yes, one day you will." They clung to those words as children do. They began to believe in the impossible because I believed it for them. And in truth, though part of me feared disappointment, I could not stop. My love for them demanded I try. The Duke knew nothing of these massages, nothing of the nights I prayed under my breath as I worked their limbs. To him, their condition was fixed, a curse carved in stone. But I refused to let despair have the last word. And sometimes, when my fingers pressed deeper, I felt the faintest twitch, a small resistance in their muscles, so subtle I feared I had imagined it. But hope clung to me. I told no one, not even the children, for fear of raising dreams too soon. Instead, I worked silently, night after night, whispering encouragement into skin that carried their mother's blood. Meanwhile, the Duke wrestled with himself. I could see it in his eyes when he passed them, in the way his hand would twitch as if he longed to reach out but did not know how. Once, he entered the nursery and stood for several long minutes, watching as they painted clumsy shapes. The girl noticed first, her brush frozen mid-air. The boy followed, his lips parting. Then, timidly, they held up their painting. A messy castle, with towers leaning and doors too wide. The Duke's face flickered with something. Pain, yes, but also pride. He cleared his throat and said, "A fine fortress." Then he turned and left before they could speak. The twins stared at each other in awe, their painting clutched between them. "He liked it," the girl whispered. "He said it was fine," the boy corrected, but his smile betrayed his joy. I watched them that night, my hands working their small legs as they drifted into sleep. And I knew. The wall was crumbling, stone by stone. The change within the manor did not go unnoticed. Servants who had grown accustomed to their cruel whispers began to hesitate. The Duke's glances, his rare words to the children, his presence in the nursery, even if fleeting, were enough to stir unease among those who had long believed the twins would remain neglected shadows. But gossip has deep roots, and cruelty seldom dies quietly. One afternoon, I carried fresh linens down the corridor when I heard voices in the servants' hall. "It's only pity," one sneered. "He doesn't truly care. He can't. Not for children like them." Another whispered, "Better he hides them forever. Nobles don't want heirs who cannot even stand." My blood burned hot. I wanted to storm in, to shout them into silence. But before I could, the sound of boots struck the stone behind me. The Duke. He had heard. He entered the hall with the weight of a storm, his presence filling the air. Conversations died, heads bowed, but it was too late. His voice, sharp and resonant, cut through the silence. "I will hear no more of this." His gray eyes swept across the room, freezing every servant in place. "They are my children. They are my heirs. And any tongue that dares speak against them insults me. If you cannot serve with loyalty, you will not serve here at all." The words struck like thunder. By dawn, 3 servants were gone, dismissed without ceremony. The others worked in fearful silence, their whispers snuffed out. And for the first time, the twins walked, or rather, were carried, through halls free of muttered curses. They did not know why the air felt lighter, why the servants' eyes no longer carried open disdain. But they sensed it, and they smiled more easily, laughed more freely. The Duke had shielded them, not in secret, but openly. And though he still kept his distance, that act was louder than any word he had ever spoken. Still, his struggle remained. At dinners with nobles, he kept the children absent, claiming they were too young, too fragile. But I saw the way his eyes followed the empty chairs beside him, the way his hand clenched on his goblet when a lord asked about succession, the way his jaw tightened when a lady remarked, "A pity, isn't it? The heir's unfit to carry the name." It came to a breaking point one evening during a banquet. The twins, eager to please, had begged me to bring them closer to the hall. I hesitated, remembering the scorn from years before. But their little faces glowed with such desperate hope that I relented. They sat quietly near the doorway, their eyes wide with awe at the glitter of gold and silk. They did not speak, did not move, only watched their father with longing. But the nobles noticed. Whispers spread, cruel and sharp. Still crippled. Cursed blood. Unworthy. The Duke's gaze found them, and for a moment I thought he might look away as he had before. The hall seemed to hold its breath. The children, trembling, tried to sit taller, their little hands clutching each other's tightly. Then, slowly, the Duke rose. His chair scraped against the floor, echoing in the hush. He walked down the length of the table, his cloak trailing like a shadow, his eyes fixed on his children. Gasps followed him, whispers cut short as he reached the doorway. He bent down, awkwardly, hesitantly, and placed his hand on each of their shoulders. "These are my children," he said, his voice low but carrying through the hall. "They are the blood of this house. They are my pride." The nobles stared, some with shock, others with disapproval, but none dared to speak against him. The twins' eyes widened, their mouths parted in wonder. Their father had not only seen them, he had claimed them, before the world. That night, as I massaged their legs by the fire, they whispered excitedly, "He called us his pride." The boy's voice cracked with awe. "Did you hear, Nanny?" the girl added, her smile trembling with joy. I nodded, tears stinging my eyes. Yes, my darlings, I heard. And in my heart, I knew that though his journey was far from over, the Duke had taken a step no one could erase. Change is a strange thing. It comes in fits and starts, like the flicker of a candle flame fighting against the wind. The Duke had declared his children before the nobles, silencing their scorn with words of pride, but within the walls of the manor, he was still learning how to live by them. He visited the nursery more often now, though always with hesitation. Sometimes he lingered by the hearth while the children painted. Other times he listened quietly as they recited their lessons. His words were clumsy, too stern at times, too brief at others, but each one left the twins glowing with delight. To them, even the smallest acknowledgement was gold. Yet he stumbled, often. One afternoon, the boy knocked over an inkwell while showing his father a drawing. Black stains spread across a stack of documents, and the Duke's temper flared. "Be careful!" he snapped, his voice too sharp. The boy's lip trembled, tears welling. For a moment, silence fell heavy, the old silence that had haunted the house for years. But then something unexpected happened. The Duke knelt, his hand resting awkwardly on his son's shoulder. His voice, rough with regret, softened. "Forgive me. I should not have shouted." The boy's tears dried instantly. He threw his arms around his father's neck, and though the Duke stiffened at first, he did not pull away. Slowly, almost uncertainly, his arms wrapped around the child in return. The girl watched with wide eyes, then tugged at his sleeve. "You're not angry anymore, Papa?" "No," he said, shaking his head. His voice cracked slightly. "No, little one." From that day, the children no longer feared his footsteps in the hall. They began to run, well, crawl and shuffle, dragging themselves eagerly to greet him. And though he still faltered, still carried the weight of his guilt, he began to smile more often when he saw them. All the while, my secret work continued. Each night, after stories and kisses goodnight, I warmed oil by the fire and massaged their legs. My hands pressed, coaxed, prayed. At first, it seemed futile. But then, small changes came. A twitch in the boy's foot. A flicker of strength in the girl's calf. At first, I doubted myself, thinking it a trick of the mind. But as weeks passed, the signs grew stronger. One night, as I worked the boy's legs, his toes curled faintly under my touch. He gasped, his eyes wide. "Nanny, I felt it." His sister, not to be outdone, insisted I press harder on her legs. When I did, her knee jerked. Both children laughed until tears ran down their cheeks, clutching each other with joy. I hushed them quickly, afraid the Duke might hear. "We must keep this our secret," I warned, though my own heart soared. "Not yet, not until we are sure." But children are poor keepers of secrets. They began to whisper excitedly about racing each other, about dancing, about showing their father. The boy announced, "When I walk, Papa will have to play with me every day." His sister added, "And I'll dance in the great hall so everyone sees." Their hope was a fragile flame, but it burned brighter each night. The Duke, though unaware of my work, noticed the change. "They seem stronger," he remarked once, watching as they pulled themselves across the floor faster than before. His voice held a note of surprise, perhaps even wonder. But he shook his head quickly, as though afraid to hope. "Do not let them dream of what cannot be," he muttered. I bit my tongue to keep from answering, for I knew what he did not. The dream was no longer impossible. It was coming true, step by step, under my hands. Still, fear lingered in me. What if the progress stopped? What if I raised their hopes only for them to be crushed? But then I remembered the Duchess's eyes, her last whispered plea. Protect them. She had not asked me to heal them, only to love them, and love demanded faith. So I continued, and with each passing day, the silence that once defined this house gave way to laughter, to clumsy games, to whispered plans of futures no one else dared imagine. It happened on a morning like any other. The mist clung to the manor windows, and the air carried the scent of rain-soaked earth. I had just finished dressing the twins, combing their soft hair, and tying ribbons at the girls' braids when the boy insisted, "Today, Nanny. I want to show him today." I froze. For weeks, they had grown stronger under my hands, their legs twitching, their feet flexing, their knees jerking with faint but undeniable life. But this was different. The boy's eyes held determination, the kind that no scolding or distraction could dim. His sister clutched his hand, nodding fiercely. Before I could answer, footsteps echoed in the hall. Heavy, steady, unmistakable. The Duke. The children's faces lit with excitement. They pushed themselves to the floor, not crawling as they once had, but pressing their feet against the boards, straining, trying to rise. My heart pounded. I wanted to stop them, to hold them back until the miracle was complete. What if they failed now? What if he saw only weakness and dismissed it forever? The door opened. The Duke stepped inside, his presence as commanding as always, but his eyes softened when they fell upon his children. "You are awake early," he said quietly, and then it happened. The boy, gritting his teeth, clutched the side of the bed. His legs shook, unsteady as reeds in the wind, but he rose, one trembling step, then another. His sister followed, clinging to the bedpost, swaying as though the earth itself tilted beneath her, yet standing. They both looked at their father, breathless, glowing with triumph. "Papa," the girl whispered, her voice trembling with hope. "We can stand." The Duke's face paled. He froze where he stood, his eyes wide as though confronted by a vision. His lips parted, but no sound came. Slowly he crossed the room, his steps hesitant, as though afraid the sight might vanish if he moved too quickly. When he reached them, he knelt. Yes, knelt before his children. His hands, large and calloused, hovered as if he dared not touch. Then, with a sudden cry, the boy stumbled forward into his arms. The Duke caught him, holding him tightly, his own breath ragged. The girl, too, let go of the post and fell against him, clutching his cloak. He pulled them close, crushing them against his chest, as though to shield them from the world. His shoulders shook, and I realized with a start that he was weeping. The cold, distant Duke, the man who had locked his heart away behind walls of stone, was undone. "You..." His voice broke. He pressed his face into their hair. "You are my strength. You are my miracle." The children laughed through their tears, wrapping their arms around him. "Do you see, Papa? We will walk with you now. We'll run and play and dance." He drew back just enough to look at them, his gray eyes shining with a light I had never seen. "You will," he whispered fiercely, "and I will be with you. Always." From the doorway, I watched with my own tears blurring the sight. The Duchess's last words echoed in my heart. Protect them. For years, I had carried that burden alone. Now, at last, it was no longer mine to bear. Their father had claimed them not just in words, but in love. But miracles, once revealed, cannot be hidden. The Duke summoned physicians, who examined the children with disbelief. Some called it impossible, others divine. Whispers spread through the manor and beyond, of twins once thought cursed, now standing by their father's side. The nobles who had mocked and scorned would soon see with their own eyes, and this time, the Duke would not look away. That night, as I tucked the children into bed. Their eyes shone with dreams larger than the walls of the nursery. The boy whispered, "Tomorrow, I'll take another step." His sister added, "And someday we'll walk into the great hall together." I kissed their foreheads, my heart brimming with gratitude. "Yes, my darlings, you will." And in the quiet of that chamber, I allowed myself to believe that perhaps this house, once cloaked in sorrow, had finally begun to heal. Word of the miracle spread faster than wildfire. By the week's end, every noble in the county seemed to know that the twins of Duke Alistair, children once whispered about as cursed, had stood on their own feet. Invitations and demands for proof flooded the manor, but it was the Duke himself who decided. He would present his children before the court. The great hall had not been so crowded in years. Candles blazed in towering chandeliers, their flames mirrored on polished marble floors. Lords and ladies in silks and jewels filled the benches, their murmurs sharp as knives. I stood behind the twins, smoothing their clothes, steadying their shoulders. They were frightened, though they tried to hide it beneath brave smiles. At the top of the steps stood the Duke. For once, his expression held no trace of coldness. Instead, it burned with resolve. When the herald announced him, silence swept the hall. He descended, not alone, but with a child on each side, their small hands clasped in his. Gasps rippled through the crowd. The twins walked. Their steps were shaky, but they moved forward, each one a blow against the cruel rumors that had haunted them. A baron whispered too loudly, "Impossible." They were broken. Everyone knew it. Another noblewoman pressed a jeweled hand to her lips, tears brimming. Some stared in awe, others in disbelief. The Duke stopped at the center of the hall. His voice, deep and steady, carried to every corner. "These are my children, born of my beloved wife, blessed by heaven itself. You called them cursed, but today you see the truth. They are the heirs of this house, and anyone who dares speak against them speaks against me." The twins clung to him, their cheeks flushed, but their eyes glowed with pride. Then, to my astonishment, he lifted the boy high into the air, letting him laugh freely, while his sister wrapped her arms around his leg. Nobles stared, wide-eyed, at a Duke they had never imagined, no longer distant or cold, but a father who claimed his children with fierce devotion. The court erupted, some in applause, some in shocked silence. But none dared challenge him. In that single moment, the shame that had clung to the children shattered like glass. That evening, when the hall emptied and the candles burned low, I found the Duke sitting in the nursery. No papers, no armor, no cloak of duty, just a man seated on the floor, listening as his daughter told him a story about knights and dragons she had imagined. His son leaned against his shoulder, already asleep. He caught my eye then. For the first time, gratitude softened his gaze. "I owe this to you," he said quietly. "You never stopped believing in them. When even I could not." I bowed my head, tears threatening. "They only needed your love, my lord. That was the true cure." He did not argue. Instead, he looked down at his children, his lips curving into the faintest, tenderest smile. And in that simple, quiet moment, I knew. The house that had once been drowned in sorrow had been reborn, not through wealth, nor through power, but through the fragile, unyielding bond of a father and his twins. Seasons passed, and the manor no longer echoed with whispers of tragedy. Instead, laughter filled its halls. The twins grew stronger with each day, their legs carrying them farther than anyone dared to hope. They ran in the gardens, climbed trees, even raced horses under the watchful eye of the stable master. Every time I watched them, my heart swelled with a pride I could not claim as my own, yet felt as fiercely as if it were. The Duke, once a man bound in grief, changed too. At first, his attempts at fatherhood were clumsy. a sword too heavy placed in his son's hand, a bedtime story told in a voice too stern. Yet the children never mocked him. They welcomed each effort, their love unconditional. Slowly, his walls crumbled. The man who once feared to touch them now carried them on his shoulders, taught them chess at the fire, and walked with them through the marketplace where once he had hidden them away. Whispers in the county shifted. The cursed heirs became the blessed twins. Where servants had once pitied them, they now offered respect, and where nobles had once scorned, they now sought favor. One evening, as the sun set in crimson hues over the estate, I found the Duke on the balcony, watching the twins chase fireflies. His face, bathed in the golden light, was not that of the cold master I had once feared. It was simply a father, awed by the lives he had nearly lost to grief. "They are the image of their mother," he said, his voice soft. "And perhaps they are my redemption." I had no reply. Tears blurred my sight as I bowed, knowing that the children's future was secured not only by their lineage, but by the love he had at last embraced. The next day, he summoned the household. In the great hall, before every servant, he spoke words none of us had ever expected. "This maid," he said, pointing to me, "is no mere servant. She is the guardian of my children, the one who kept them alive when I could not see past my sorrow. For her devotion, she shall remain forever under this roof, honored as part of our family." Gasps echoed. My knees trembled. But the twins ran to me, their arms around my waist, and in their eyes, I saw the only reward I had ever wanted, their happiness. Years would pass. The Duke would rule with newfound compassion. The twins would grow, their names spoken with admiration. And I, though still only a maid, would forever be remembered as the woman who defied despair, who shielded two fragile lives until even the coldest heart could be thawed. Because in the end, it was not magic that saved them. It was not noble blood, nor fortune, nor destiny. It was love, the kind that heals wounds unseen, the kind that transforms grief into hope, the kind that teaches even a duke that children are not burdens, but blessings. And every night, when I closed my eyes, I whispered a prayer of gratitude, that I had lived long enough to see the day when laughter replaced silence, when twins once rejected were cherished beyond measure, and when a broken family became whole again.